All right, Mary, now it's time. We talked about empathy. We talked about compassion. We talked to Tierney Wade about how much of this empathy gene is in your DNA and how much empathy can be taught. Complex stuff. But here's what I keep thinking about. Let me play out a scenario for you. And then we'll talk about difficult conversations, which we were just talking behind everyone's back, our team over here in our studio, about these conversations. You have to let someone go. You have to let someone go on your team. Why? Because the person's not carrying their weight. The person's not performing at a certain level. You've got to make financial cutbacks. Scarlett was just talking about Elon Musk was saying he had to let a bunch of people go. You said it was one of the hardest days in his life, right? So here's the question, Mary. If we have empathy, does that not mean that we care deeply about someone's mortgage, rent, their got to pay for their kids' college? You always talk about that with your two boys. Same here as well. Mm-hmm. You got bills to pay. That person just had a new baby. They bought a new house, whatever. But we've had to make those decisions, Mary. And to that person, I and you, because you did it with me, we look terribly unempathetic. Do you know that?
Yes.
Yeah, no, am I making this up?
But you want to know what? If you don't make those difficult decisions and if you don't have those challenging conversations, the entire team is going to suffer. For example, if you have somebody on your team, they are not pulling their weight, they're not meeting deadlines, they're not communicating and sharing information with the team, that is going to send the message to the rest of the team that subpar behavior, subpar performance is acceptable. That's going to grow like a cancer within the organization. And, at certain times, I actually had people on our team come to me and say, hey, listen, so-and-so is not pulling his or her weight and the extra slack is falling on me. So if you don't make the decision, and it is hard, none of us want to do it. We all want to sing Kumbaya together. And at the end of the day, be like, rah, rah, it's great. But for the longevity and the sustainability of the organization and happy teams and collaborative teams, you need to, have those difficult conversations.
But here's the deal, as we provide some tips on having difficult conversations, which are, in fact, I want to be clear. I mentioned my coaching work a lot. My leadership coaching often winds up focusing on this issue. Well, I have to have a difficult conversation with so-and-so on the team, and I'm not sure how to do it. Okay. You have to confront the situation. You have to deal with it directly. I'm not saying it's easy, but here's the thing I've learned, Mary. And Elvin, Elvin, come on in for a second? Or is Elvin directing right now and he can't do anything else? Because I want to pull him in for a second. Elvin, if you can come in. So, Elvin, respond to this if you could. By the way, thank you for wearing the Steve Adubato lessons and Stand and Deliver lessons.
Representing, I love it.
I love it. Elvin, here's the deal. If someone on the team, say in this case, you and the rest of our team, if you're peeved at me as the leader because I'm acting in a cranky way or a less than productive way, and my attitude is terrible, which is not just hypothetical, it's happened in the past, that's on me. But if I make a decision that this is what we need to do for the best of the team, what's best for the team, and someone's angry at me and goes home and says to their significant other or their friend, Steve's a jerk, he doesn't care about people, it hurt us because he let so-and-so go, I have to live with that, don't I?
You do have to live with that. And I can't say where, but I'm dealing with that same situation right now. I need to have a rough conversation with someone who works for me. And I have to let them know that, unfortunately, they may be taking a substantial amount of a pay cut. I've been dealing with that. I've been trying to talk to my wife about it. And it's going to be a difficult conversation to have. But at the end of the day, my hands are tied and it has to happen. I don't think that makes me a bad person. I think it's just the company's needs. And the person needs to realize that it's not personal. It's just business.
And what if that person does feel that it's personal and you've hurt them personally? You have to live with that as a leader.
I do have to live with that. And I try to explain to everyone that I work with, we can be friends, but at the end of the day, we also have to understand how to separate friendship from business. Just because I'm your friend doesn't mean that I don't care about your just because we work together doesn't mean I don't care about your well-being. Sometimes we have to make difficult decisions. And Frank could contest to that because unfortunately during a time, he had
Frank Brown, our exceptional audio engineer, coming on as we speak. Go ahead.
Yes. At one point in time, I had to give him a tough conversation. It didn't mess up our friendship, but it was just a tough conversation that needed to be had.
I don't know though, Elvin. You said it didn't mess up the friendship, yet he's not turning his camera on right now.
Frank, hold on.
That was as if on cue.
Okay, Frank's laughing. Frank, let me ask you this, without going into the specifics of what that conversation was, because it was private, not our business. How hard was it for you to hear your friend and colleague and someone you've mentored, we've talked about this in the past, tell you what he believed as leader you needed to hear? How hard was that for you?
I mean, if you understand the situation, and once again, business is business, friendship is friendship. Elvin and I became friends through business. So we first were really just working together. So I also knew what was coming down the pike. So him having to deliver that to me and also being a friend, I had to make it easy for him just the same, so that, being mature enough to accept what was coming to me, just so we could get through it.
Yeah.
But Mary, that's Frank. See, Frank's a mature, solid professional who I've worked with for 30 years. That makes one of us really old, not Frank, me. But I think Frank's the exception, Mary, because when we did it a while back, we did not have that reaction. Fair?
Correct. Yeah. But you want to know what? There is a difference between completely letting somebody go and having to have a very challenging conversation that, maybe isn't a complete cut the ties, but is still hard to either the wallet, the bank account, or just morale or ego. But, there is a little bit of a difference there. But yeah, it's never easy. Never, ever easy.
All right, John, for Frank and for Elvin and for everybody, Mary, we got some tips and tools.
I was just going to say the first and foremost is to empathize, right? So we'll have Sylvester put that on screen. We already talked that. Empathize. You need to empathize with that person and what you're going to say. You need to manage your emotions, right? Like sometimes it is personal, as Elvin was just talking about. You do have that personal side, but you need to manage your emotions. You want to make sure that if you are angry or upset at a situation, don't show it. But also on the flip side, if you're empathizing too much and you're really sad, the worst thing you're going to do is cry as you're letting the person know this difficult to hear news. So you need to keep your stuff together.
Stay on that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know we're talking about listening before I interrupt you, but let's stay on that. Alvin, you're managing your emotions. Frank is, again, the consummate professional. But if someone on the other end is not only getting emotional, that you're sharing this difficult conversation with difficult news to hear. That's what leaders do very often. But now that person is now saying things about you that are personal, but you did this, and then you're terrible at that, and you're getting paid too much money, and why don't you take some of your fat salary and give it to, it's getting personal. Mary's saying keep your emotions in check. Go ahead, Alvin.
You have to keep your emotions in check, because at the end of the day, you are who you are. And me personally, I've always said this, I don't care what people say about me. It doesn't pay the bills.
Alvin.
I don't. I don't care what people
I
say
have
about
said
me.
the same thing to Steve about that forever.
It's not gonna kill. It's not gonna kill me. It's not gonna hurt my feelings, because I know who I am.
Yeah.
If you know who you are, words don't hurt.
Alvin.
I feel the same way.
Mary, listen. When people tell me they don't care what anybody says, what they say, I respect it to a degree. But are you telling me that all of us don't want to be liked? Seriously?
I told you I don't care that much. It puts too much control in the other person's perception of me if I care to that degree. Of course, it's nice to be liked. I don't want to be demoralized or insulted. But at the end of the day, I'm confident enough in myself and my ability and my work that I don't let that get under my skin.
Frank, real quick, before we go to the next tip and difficult conversation, does it being, quote, liked, because I often say to our clients that I'm coaching, you want to be liked all the time, you can't be a great leader. But
That's
I do want to be
absolutely right. It's absolutely right.
Go ahead, Frank.
There's no way to be a great leader and be liked all the time.
Right.
Why no way?
You have to be the bad person, and in your eyes, you're doing what you have to do because it's your job. But the bottom line is, the people that you may have to deliver bad information to, they may not like it, but so you become the bad guy in their eyes.
Can I bring this up? Now we're taping at the end of September 2023. This will be seen later. This is going to be old news, but it's still important news. The Jets. I'm a Giants fan, but root for the Jets as well. It's not like the Mets. I'm a Yankee fan. I don't like the Mets, but that's another story. The Jets had to have a hard conversation with, well, by the time this airs, he may not be on the team, Zach Wilson. They bring in the superstar quarterback, right, who's get 4 games in, he's hurt. They got a backup quarterback that's not really a quarterback. He can't play in the NFL. Backup starter can't play, Zach Wilson. They had to have a hard conversation with him that you got to go. Because by not doing that, and he's probably gone by the time this airs, you're actually giving the shaft to the rest of the team. Alvin, go, and then Mary and Frank. That's a hard conversation. For whatever reason, they didn't have it. Go ahead, Alvin.
It is a hard conversation to have, but at the end of the day, if you keep this bad person on your team,
he's not a bad person. He's a bad quarterback.
Well, that's what I mean. If you keep this bad quarterback on your team, all it's going to do is hurt your team. Now your players aren't going to want to play. They're not going to respect the quarterback. They're not going to have any confidence in what he can do. So it's better to cut the cord now than prolong it.
Cut the cord. Get him off the bus, Mary.
Yeah, get them off the bus. Sometimes you need to make that difficult decision.
Frank, final word, then Mary, pick back up difficult conversations.
What he needs to do is find out what he's actually good at and hone in on that versus trying to play the role of something that he's not good at. So
What about if it's not football?
It may not be football. May not be.
I know, but they pay.
I'm an audio engineer. I'm not a director. I'm not a producer.
You know what's so funny? Listen to Frank right now. I'll get off this in a second. And again, we don't know what's going to happen with Zach Wilson. One of the reasons the Jets kept him on the team, this isn't about football. It was when you take someone, this is leadership. When you pick someone as the first pick in the draft and you pay that person dozens of millions of dollars, then you're afraid to let that person go because it makes everyone know that you realize you made a mistake. Yep, you did. Cut your losses. Let it go. You got to eat the money because no one else wants them. I'm not saying it's hard to do, but that's leadership. Mary, third point.
Yeah, and I was going to say the third point was going to be agile, and that just brought to my mind, Elvin, I know we're doing this in real time. Do we have our guests back in the waiting room? Shall we try? Why don't we take a quick pause where we are, Steve? We will definitely pick this back up, and we'll see if we can get our guest on, and then we'll be back in just a second. How do you like that, being agile?
We're agile. I'll be back after this. Promotional support for this edition of Lessons in Leadership with me, Steve Adubato, and my colleague, Mary Gamba, has been provided by NJ.com, NJBIA, and New Jersey Business Magazine, CIA NJ, and Commerce Magazine, and Meadowlands Media, a print and digital business news network. We're back. No, we're not wearing what we were wearing before. Why? Because it's 4:47 in the afternoon, and we were taping the other thing at 10:06. Yes, we tape out of order. Mary, what were we talking about?
We were talking about some really important things. So for viewers, they would have just seen us talking about those really difficult conversations. And we were giving, tips and tools. You need to empathize. You need to manage your emotions. And then we quickly talked a little bit about being agile and flexible because we were potentially throwing to one of our guests that we ended up having on later in the day. So that's where we left off. So we can pick it up with another tip or tool. And I have one if you'd like.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Have a strategy. And that's my strategy was making sure that Frank and Elvin were both back on camera because I would love to get their opinion on this. When you need to have that difficult conversation, obviously Elvin was talking about the fact that he had to have a difficult conversation with someone. When you need to have that difficult conversation, how important is it, Frank, your turn, to have a strategy going into that conversation?
I mean, a strategy is important for anything. I mean, if you don't figure out how to deliver it, because the delivery is everything. How you present it is everything. And it could be the same message for a bunch of people. So what's important is how you deliver to each person individually. And that, as a good leader, you have to figure that out. That's very important.
I like what Frank said, but let me push back a little bit, my friends. As the great leadership philosopher Mike Tyson once said, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. So let me ask. No, wait a minute. You think I made that up, Elvin?
You're muted.
I've heard that before.
Yeah, okay. I didn't say I made it up. All I'm saying is you got a plan. I hear you. You got a strategy. I hear you. Difficult conversations. It goes sideways. You get punched in the face metaphorically, meaning you get pushback you didn't expect. What happened to your plan, Elvin?
That's a good question. The plan's out the window. Now you're ad-libbing. But for me personally, I try to go over every conversation that I'm going to have with anyone, meaning an employee or a colleague, with my wife. She's my biggest advocate. She works in human resources, is what she does for a living. So I run everything past her, and she comes back to me, well, they may say this, they may say that. So I try to be well prepared because the one thing I don't want to do is make anyone cry or put myself in a bad situation to say something that I may not have should have said.
Okay. So now we're getting down to it. You've never made anybody cry by delivering a hard message in a difficult conversation. Because if I know I have.
I have not. Only children, meaning my children, but no one in a professional environment.
Wait, Elvin, in all truth, have you ever had to let anybody go?
I have, actually. I was on a job doing an esports gig, and I had a handheld operator who was just very, very, very lazy. And I was trying to make work.
So that's why they didn't cry, because they didn't care.
No, he did care.
Mary, did you hear the session we did on listening? Just
sorry.
Okay, go ahead, Elvin.
At the end of the day, I had to have that conversation with him, and I tried to have my production manager do it, and he was like, "No, if you're gonna let him go, it's on you. You got to let him know." So I told him, and I thought he took it okay until I was leaving the building, and as I was leaving with some other coworkers, he approached me and was like, "Well, please give me another chance. I really need this job. You know, this was a 3-day event. I was planning on that money," and I was like, "I'm sorry, the decision was already made." Long story short, I'm glad that I was with other colleagues because he was ready to have an altercation over me letting him go.
Wait, hold on. The Mike Tyson thing just got real. So Hold on. You're saying that you actually think that he wouldn't have cried, but he may have gotten physical.
Oh, no, he was ready to get physical. But luckily, I was with a group of people that it didn't go that way.
Wow.
But you got to think about it, Steve. In the freelance industry, when you're on a gig and you're supposed to get 4 days straight and you're fired after the first day, who knows his circumstances?
You know, let me ask you something, Frank. There's a rule that if you get fired, it's not a rule, but I always thought about this because I've been fired so many times from different networks. And you know, when a network says we're going in a different direction, that means they don't want you. I figured that out. Never beg for the job. You believe in that, Frank? Never beg. Absolutely. I won't beg.
No, you have to have some self-respect. Your integrity is everything in front of these people. And it also lets them know that, you know, there's a possibility you could circle back and hire me again. So, and they need to know that. But if you go out whining and seem like your self-respect is out the window, the bottom line is, why would I hire this person again?
I love it. Hey, Mary, you got any more tips on these difficult conversations?
I do. I would love to just finish with this one because I think it's important. Use real life examples. So whenever you have to have a difficult conversation, don't just say to somebody, you know, Steve, you really, you know, were a jerk today. You didn't handle that well, right? No, instead go to somebody and say, Steve, you know, when you spoke to X, Y, and Z in this way, let me give you an example. Yes. It probably wasn't received well, right? So make sure you always use concrete, specific examples so the person knows what you mean.
Sorry for interrupting you, Mary. I just was saying we all needed to listen better. I interrupted you.
That's okay.
Elvin, are you giving us the message in the chat that it says officially say goodbye?
Yes, sir.
Frank, do us a favor. You got a great voice for television, radio, or any media platform. Frank, do us a favor. Say goodbye to everyone.
Thank you for joining us today on our show, ladies and gentlemen. We want to, I don't know if you need to thank your sponsors or anything, Steve, but at this point, we always want to thank the sponsors, but have a good day.
Wow, he was good. See you next time. This edition of Lessons in Leadership is made possible by the Buccino Leadership Institute at Seton Hall University, Prager Metis, Valley Bank, the International Union of Operating Engineers Local 825, the North Ward Center, the New Jersey Sharing Network, Delta Dental of New Jersey, the Helix, Fedway Associates Inc., Veolia, Resourcing the World, Choose New Jersey, and Seton Hall University, showing the world what great minds can do since 1856.
This is Mary Gamba. If you want more leadership tips and tools, log on to stand-deliver.com. That's stand-deliver.com.
Promotional support for this edition of Lessons in Leadership with me, Steve Adubato, and my colleague, Mary Gamba, has been provided by NJ.com, NJBIA, and New Jersey Business Magazine, CIANJ, and Commerce Magazine, and Meadowlands Media, a print and digital business news network.